Hello, welcome to the Rankers. I'm Kyle Wright, and with me again is Stuart McPhee. How are you, Stuart?
Carl Wright, you son of a bitch. I'm great. I'm so great. I'm here to talk about the greatest things of all, the greatest hits.
Oh, that's a wonderful segue there, Stuart. Now, before anyone asks, no, we're not. We don't have very short wardrobes. We are recording on the same night as our previous podcast. A new thing we're trying out to make sure that we get as much content out there as possible. So, as Stuart mentioned, we are talking about our favorite greatest hits albums of all time. How did you go researching this one, Stuart?
This was an interesting one, and I don't know about you, but I've really focused on ones that came out in the CD era, and I think
Yeah, me too.
excellent, and I think the reason for that is once CDs came around, that's when greatest hits albums really came into their own, and there's obviously some really great ones from the vinyl era.
Yep.
But I think the fact that you could fit more onto a CD than a single disc vinyl meant that the accessibility was there. And there's a number of other things, particularly when you got really great bands who have been on different labels. By the time you got to the CD era and record labels and the conglomerate started to sort of meld together, and there were fewer labels, meant that a lot of artists previously where you could only get certain tracks because they then switched labels, meant that CDs usually had a little bit more flexibility with whatever deals to license tracks from other labels, or that label owned that label now, so it was a little bit easier. But I think also um, it's that sweet spot before the streaming era where greatest hits aren't a thing anymore, because people can just create their own playlists and be damned if they're going to be held to whatever a record label says is a greatest hits. So that's where I've focused it. But I think also, and we'll talk in a minute around what we think makes a greatest hits and what's the point of them. I think also the the era of buying music has also essentially ended, unless you're an idiot like me who still buys vinyl. It means that the idea of the need for a contractually obligated greatest hits because you need to get to a certain sales target for Christmas is just irrelevant. So that, along with the fact that it's all streaming now, has meant this is almost a lost art. But tell me about your affinity with greatest hits and where it sits with you.
Yeah, I actually spend a lot of wasted time nowadays curating my own playlists. It's actually of a hobby. I rarely play any of the playlists because I don't have enough time in the day with three children and a full time job to actually get through and listen to them.
Yeah,
But it is one of the joys I have. I guess for me, the greatest hits CDs were a great way to get into a band that you didn't know that much of. So growing up, my dad, massive Beatles fan, so I essentially was just listening to the Beatles, but through greatest hits. I won't give away any of the bands that I got introduced to because they form part of my top five, but I guess it was a way that you, without having to do a deep dive into back catalogs, you could essentially they were the radio songs or the popular songs, and you got to get a sense of whether you liked that band or not. So
yeah,
for me, that was a way of getting into it. I wasn't, even though Dad had a really big record collection. By the time I grew up and started listening to my choice of music, it was CDs. So Greatest Hits was a good way to get around that.
yeah. I think you're right, and there's certainly, apart from the record label machinations of getting more product out there, and so we'll put the commerciality of that aside. I think you're right in that the first aim of a greatest hits or a best of or a collection. So we'll use all those terms interchangeably in this discussion. Is really to get, provide an introduction to someone for them to get into a band. And if they stop at that level of, hey, I like all the songs I've heard on the radio, this is the collection for me. And here's a new one that the band have knocked up and put on, which may become a hit. So, sometimes it ends up becoming, one of their bigger hits. Sometimes it's something just to add on for fans to be infuriatingly having to buy to complete their collection. But I think to the point that you made, and certainly with the 5 that I've chosen as well, it then becomes, this is just the start. The next layer down is, I love everything off this. Okay, so which album do I start with outside of a greatest hits? And then you build it from there. And then next thing you know that, I certainly know with at least the top 3 that I've got, I own every album of theirs in some format, whether it be CD or vinyl. So that it goes. That's the sort of the secret winner of a greatest hits, where it's just the starting point for you, and then everything else that you discover of that group, you owe to finding your way through a greatest hits.
Yeah. Because I know you love to do this, have you tackled your way to the top 5 with a certain selection criteria or something like that? Or you've just gone, these are my 5 favorites?
Yeah, I came to it pretty quickly, and in saying that, there's probably others where, I could have gone, another 5 or 10 others, but these were the ones where, because I did focus on the CD era, that the sort of selection criteria was a couple of things. It was this likely my first exposure to them? And in most of them, that is the case. And do I, have fond memories of thrashing the CD in the car or at home? And that's another criteria. And then to add to that is, it's usually a couple of other things. So, and this is, we're getting into very music nerd sort of level here, is greatest hits usually, particularly in the CD era, you used to have these really great liner notes in them.
Yep.
And there'd be these really interesting essays written by sometimes famous people. And I know with about 3 of mine, I think they are the top 3 as well, they have these really great mini essays in there of the band. And I can think of others that I don't have in my list that are also really great collections. The thing I remember is the essay in it. There's one by a really prominent Australian band. I won't give it away in case it's in your top 5, where Tim Winton is does the essay in it. And I remember that just as much as I remember listening to the songs. And so was also a bit of a criteria for me. But I ended up landing on the 5 pretty easily. What about yourself?
Yeah, I came up with mine 5 pretty easily. I've actually gone with, obviously, the bands that introduced me, or greatest hits that introduced me to the band and or artist. But I've actually gone with the ones that made my top 5 were ones that I thought had not as great strong back catalogs.
Okay.
But the greatest hits was, the best of their catalog, rather than choosing a greatest hits from a band that had for me a stronger catalog from, say, a chronological studio albums, very strong, and then you've collected greatest hits from that. I've tended to go with more from, all right, these are the cream of the crop from their catalog, and and not saying that their catalog isn't strong, but I feel, in my opinion, the greatest hits is like an outlier to, the entire catalog, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no,
Would
it
you?
does. It's interesting because if I think about the five that I've got, I would say four of them have good claims to be, if you could only get one album from this group or this artist, this is the one for you. Even if they're ones where I'm a little bit more obsessed with the back catalog than the regular Joe, who at that, like, as I was mentioning before, at that first layer of, hey, this collects everything that I really like, and I don't need to necessarily dig further because I like them at this level, and not anything deeper. So no, that certainly makes sense.
So
Yeah,
I'll give you an example. So
yeah,
for example, I haven't chosen a Beatles greatest hits because, in my opinion, the back catalogue of the Beatles is strong without
yes,
needing a greatest hits.
yeah,
Uh, Looking closer to home, I haven't chosen a Silverchair because they have, in my opinion, a very strong back catalogue. So the
yeah,
greatest hits don't necessarily pull out the absolute best because, in my opinion, they're all great songs. So
yeah. No,
again,
no,
haven't chosen Oasis because, same reason. So I've gone
yeah,
for more of the bands where I think that the songs chosen on the greatest hits, the very best of,
yeah,
whatever we're calling it, is,
yes,
the best of the best, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
No, no, that makes absolute sense.
All
And with
right.
that, would you like to kick us off, sir?
I was going to say, why don't you kick us off, Stuart, given that this is your baby and your idea?
Sure. Okay, I'll go with. So the first one is probably the one where uh, it's it's a little bit difficult to say that this is the best collection from this artist, but um, much like as you were alluding to with your top five, it's probably it collects everything that I like,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't necessarily need to go any deeper. And this will probably offend two-thirds of people who like the different iterations. Plus, it's a bit of a collection of three different acts. So this is Hit Parade and it's attributed to Paul Weller, but it's actually collects the best of the best. And I don't know if he chose this or whether it was a record company that put this one together. But it collects the best songs from the Jam, then following that, his 80s, more 80s soul synth band, Style Council, and then his reemergence as the mod father and the sort of the elder statesman of Britpop in his solo era from the 90s onwards. So uh, it actually started as a 4 CD collection of pretty much the very exhaustive jam best jam songs, best Style Council songs, and best Paul Weller, and then it's just distilled it down into a single disc. Um, as I said, there's probably Jam fans and Style Council fans and just Paul Weller solo fans that go, this shouldn't exist. It's an abomination, and shortchanges every single iteration. But I think it's a nice collection. It's sort of at the end of the CD era. It came out in '06. I remember I was still working in the record store then. I remember coming in and going, this is it. This is everything. I can just play this. I don't have to you know, play, the Style Council best of that has the 5 or 6 songs I like, and then the rest where it doesn't really work for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a collection that I keep on going back to. I wish it was released on vinyl. I would get it in a second. I'd probably, in order of the favorite periods, I'd probably say the Paul Weller solo era, when in the mid '90s, was probably my favorite songs. Then the Jam, then Style Council, in that order. But yeah, it's just a really great collection. I don't even know. I think it may be available on your Spotify's and your streaming services as Hit Parade still. But it's probably not one that a lot of people would go to. But it's a good entree into the different iterations of Paul Weller over a 30-year career.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'll have to check it out on Apple Music.
excellent.
All right, my number five, and as you know, I try to have an Australian flavour in all of my rankings here, if possible. So I've actually gone with In Excess's greatest hits. Does that make
Nice.
your list at all?
It didn't. It was in consideration for me. This is the one sort of released in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see if I got it on here. I think 94 and 96. I think it might have had two releases there.
Yep.
So again, in excess, one of my great regrets is never being able to see in excess live, because I've seen some of their live shows, either on Music Max or whatever used to be on Foxtel, those
Yep.
music channels there, and I'm just in awe of the stage presence and the performance and the
Yeah.
massive crowds they play at Wembley and all that sort of thing. So unfortunately, didn't get that chance due to Hutchins passing away, and didn't want to go to the JD Fortune, memorial tour or whatever it was. So yeah, so for me, In Excess, they have a pretty good, they have a great back catalogue, but for me, the songs on the greatest hits are the best of In Excess. There's not really a lot that isn't on the greatest hits that you would maybe put on there. What I found interesting when I was doing my research is that they actually had their greatest hits, and they had different track listings for depending on the region where they released it.
Yep.
So, for instance, "Just Keep Walking," which is my favorite In Excess song, is the first track on the Australian release, whereas you've got other songs as the first track, and that track doesn't even make those US, and I saw a Brazilian one and a Japan one as well. So some great tracks on there, and I think they even released maybe "The Strangest Party," which was the last song, which might have been a single for the greatest hits, which so wasn't essentially a greatest hits,
Hmm.
but I could be wrong there. But yeah, so for me, I've got number 5, In Excess greatest hits.
Good choice. The I really like that release, and then I think after the final Hutchins album, and probably a few years after that, they then before the JD Fortune era, they released I think it was a double best of. It was a red cover, and it pretty much then went chronologically.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, obviously filled it out a lot more up to the elegantly wasted album. And as someone who I think I like them in terms of the back catalogue a little bit more than yourself. That to me felt like it was the right number of tracks for for essentially a career of a really great Australian band. So yeah, it ended up being superseded a little bit, but yeah, that single disc was still really really good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm actually a really huge fan of bands that do a greatest hits in a chronological sense. I think that's a
Yes.
really smart and clever way to go about it, rather than a mix and match of, um, earlier, mid, later stuff all mixed
Yeah.
up on that track listing. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. It sometimes, and I think for In Excess, I think it works really well. If you do have a band that really tails off towards the end, and it's a double disc, that second disc becomes really difficult to
That's
listen
true.
to.
That's
I
true.
think
Good point.
Icehouse did the clever thing when they released. They redid a best of. I think it was called White Box, or came out probably about 10 years ago now. But their biggest album, Man of Colors, actually straddles the two discs,
Oh,
and I
okay. So
don't.
like half greatest hits, then the other half, or something like that.
Well, as in, it just so happens, sort of chronologically, that the first two or three singles from Man of Colors is the last couple of songs on disc one, and then it starts with the remaining singles from
Ah,
that.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah. I see.
and I think that was it's not that it was deliberate; it just so happened by doing it chronologically, but it also meant that there was, because it does start to tail off after Man of Colors, at least for a casual fan, and you sort of think, oh, that second disc, it's probably not getting a lot of play in whatever household it's. If you compare the two, the classic looking at a CD and seeing all the scratches and wear, that second disc is probably looking pretty shiny. Um, but
All right.
nevertheless, all right. So number
You're
four
number
for me.
4, Stuart.
Yes, I remember Um, the old man had been working away for a couple of months. We live in country Victoria at the time. He was working down Melbourne way. He came back, and we never used to have a lot of actual tapes in the cars, in bought tapes. It was usually a playlist that the old man had sort of cribbed off Rage, with the old double, or taping the video and then recording it onto audio cassette. And the man was ahead of his time.
Geez,
And
that audio quality must have been fresh.
just the old TDK classics and the anyway, and the BASF. Anyway, so to our surprise, there was an actual tape that was bought at a Brash's, no doubt, or an early incarnation of JB Hi-Fi, and it was the very best of Van Morrison.
Oh, nice.
And until that stage, I'd probably, I'd probably heard Gloria, either Gloria or Brown Eyed Girl before. And it wasn't until I was looking at some of the research recently that, this was his very first compilation, and he'd already done 25 years worth of albums, and he was pretty prolific as well. He probably had done about 20 albums since then. So it's amazing to think that your first compilation is 25 years after sort of first starting, where these days, well, at least I don't know if you felt the same way, but sort of in the early 2000s, people would release a greatest hits, and it's like, they've only done 2-3 albums. What are you doing here? Once again, it's the record company contractual obligations to get something out for Christmas. But very best of Van Morrison on cassette. Hearing Bright Side of the Road, the first track on it, for the very first time, going, I don't think I've heard anything like this before in my life. And our family just fell in love with it, and so did I. And that then started a journey for me in terms of different eras of Van Morrison. Obviously there's the first couple of albums which are seen as stone cold classics. The album that Bright Side of the Road is from the late 70s. I think it's Into the Music is the name of that album, and that's now one of my favorites. So it helped me go on this bit of a journey and hear albums that are not that great, but there's just one really good song on it, and I could then see why a lot of people were attracted to it. And my understanding is it's now his best-selling album, for that reason, because it collected all these, whether they're radio hits or just album-orientated radio station hits. They've just become enduring classics, quite a lot of them from that record. So yeah, very best of Van Morrison. It's the classic one. Every one of our parents probably had a copy of it somewhere with the old style microphone on the front, and yeah.
Oh, I distinctly remember it because I played it to death as well. Great album. Actually, it takes me back to, I think it was either year 7 or year 8 camp. Can't remember if it was a teacher or someone they brought in, and they were playing some acoustic songs for one of the night activities or whatever. And I can thank that greatest hits album for the question. I think it was Gloria he was playing, and asked for the artist, and I was the only one in the grade that could answer that it was Them, which was Van Morrison's band before he went solo. So yes. I've got that greatest hits compilation to thank for that, being able to answer that question. Not sure it got me any cred whatsoever with anyone in the grade, but it's a memory I have anyway. I'll be able to my claim to fame, which is not very famous. All right, my number 4 is probably the epitome of what you were recently discussing, where the second the second CD of the two kind of fades away, and this artist is a prolific artist. There are some very, very not so great albums in their back catalogue. There's one or two. One definitely is considered a classic. I don't see it myself as a classic, but I got onto it later and probably during the time it was. Do you want to have a guess at who this may be? A solo artist?
Solo artist?
Known for their piano playing?
Billy Joel?
No, it's Elton John.
Elton John.
Yes, so I've got Elton John's "The Very Best Of" as one of my greatest hits. Probably more for the first disc than the second disc. So,
Now, can
uh,
I guess? Is this the one from like 1990? It's a bluish cover.
yes,
Yeah.
bluish with him wearing that hat he liked and sunglasses, and he's
Yes.
sort of looking up to the sky with his hands clasped.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
very much remembered it came in those really thick CD cases as well.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Which, going back to talking about being in a record store, you get one of those and it's broken, it's game over, man. You cannot get replacements for those.
No. No, you can't. So, first disc, like, try this on for size. Your Song, Rocket Man, Honky Cat, Crocodile Rock, Daniel, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting, Candle in the Wind, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Philadelphia Freeman, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Pinball Wizard, and The Bitch Is Back.
It's pretty
Um,
good. Pretty
yeah,
good.
and there's some good ones on the second side as well, but it kind of does fade away a bit with Easier to Walk Away, and You Got to Love Someone towards the end of the second disc. But
Mm.
that first disc got a lot of playing from me, and was my introduction to Elton John. I did do a deep dive into his back catalogue when I went to see him a couple of years ago, because I knew he was one that changed up songs on his set, so I wanted to get a good gauge of what I might be hearing on the night. Great concert, by the way. But for me, as great as Elton John has been, those hits really stand high above um, a lot of that back catalogue.
Yeah, and I guess similar to Van in that from an album point of view, the first four or five are all pretty much declared classics from a lot of classic rock critics, and then in a similar sort of era, from around the mid to late 70s onwards, it starts to tail off, and it's where um, Elton would release an album each year, but you then sort of trace it back to the greatest hits. There's only one song being featured from it.
Mm,
And in some cases, you're going three or four albums in a row, and there's nothing
right.
from it. Um, and I think a lot of that's to do with. I think he sort of parted ways with working with Bernie Taupin for a couple of years, and
Possibly.
then came back.
Yeah.
And I think he realised that was sort of the dynamic duo needed to be working together in order to produce his great stuff. So
Yep. He went it. Obviously, they went an interesting way of going about their songwriting, where he would be provided with the lyrics first, and then he'd, put a song around that, which is
yeah.
generally not the way
No,
songs are made. So, yeah. Anyway, so Elton John's my number 4.
excellent. I spoke about in our other podcast about Crowded House. Fair to say that's one of my favourite acts of all time. So I'm putting their Recurring Dream,
Yeah,
greatest hit, at number 3.
great album.
Um, and whilst it wasn't my first introduction to Crowded House, it's probably the most played album of the '90s for me. I knew the track listing and the order off by heart, and it was just it was, whilst it wasn't the introduction, as I said, it was certainly the launching point of, okay, well, at that stage they had only done 4 albums. I thought that's easy to sort of lock into and discover and find out what I like about them. And interestingly, 3 new songs which sort of pointed the way towards what could have been. They were sort of on their way to doing a 5th album. Paul Hester, the drummer, had left, and as they were sort of gearing up to promote the album, that's when Neil pulled the pin on the band and said, I don't think this is going to be a viable thing anymore." And then they went away, and of course, it was actually Paul's death that then brought them back together about a decade later, and they've been apart from Nick and Neil, they've been in different incarnations, but Recurring Dream, I think probably every 4th household in Australia owns a copy of it, or owned a copy at some stage. Starts a
Every it would have been every household in the 90s, surely.
I would imagine so. And it's the the thing of we've done 4 albums. they grab 3 or 4 songs off each album, while still leaving a lot of bigger radio hits off them as well, which meant that there was enough for you to listen to one of their studio albums, go, oh, I know that song as well, but I was expecting it to be on it, and that's something that will come up again with my number one. Um, and it's also similar to my number two in that it's called Recurring Dream, but the song Recurring Dream is not on it.
Yeah.
Um, Recurring Dream, I think, does come up on some later best ofs of Crowded House, which aren't as well known as Recurring Dream was. But that album absolutely played to death, and the 3 new songs are also really, really good. There's one that is almost a note for note Beatles song, Not the Girl You Think You Are, and Instinct I really liked, and Everything Is Good For You was a radio hit as well. So they knocked it out of the park, and I think just as they got into that sort of household level of fame, then he pulled the pin. So, and then basically had a decade of stalling the momentum of the band. But I think they've become just as popular now as what they were when they were first around.
Oh, absolutely. Was that around the time when they did the Sydney Opera House farewell, or was that a different time?
No.
They're like John Farnham. They have a lot of comebacks. So
no, it was I think the album came out 90. Was it 95? No, it was 96. And then it was when they were promoting it that he pulled the pin, and then the Farewell to the World was in November of that year. So it was. I don't think the record company were too pleased with this whole thing of the band not going on, because they had, and because the best of was sort of in the top 10 for another year and a bit, meant that the long tail of the group, with everyone going, well, what's happened here? Everything's here is great. They had they had this really great momentum. I remember in retrospect, because I wouldn't have been as close to it at the time. I think it was the 90, must have been the 95 Brit Awards for 94. They actually won Best International Band over like Pearl Jam and REM and U2, and to get that award is pretty good, even though a lot of these awards are usually just record company driven, for your consideration type things. But it shows what level they were getting to, particularly in Europe, because the States had sort of fallen away. But it becomes the sort of the big what if they had continued on and did a fifth album in that incarnation, but not to be.
Yeah. My memory of that album is, was it a live version of Sister Madly? And there's like a lot
It's
of
on the second
banter.
disc, yeah.
Yeah, the second disc, and there's a lot of banter towards I love that song so much.
Yep.
But that got a lot of play in our household as well. What a great choice for number 3 there, Stuart. Well done.
Thank you. And yes, because I could go on about them all night, but I won't. But yes, Sister Madly was one of those songs which wasn't on the first disc of the studio tracks, where you go, I've heard that song before. Why isn't it on there? And there was the same for about 2 or 3 others. So they were one of those bands.
And correct me if I'm wrong, was that a chronological order?
No,
because I seem to remember like the songs with his brother were towards the start of the disc. But maybe.
Yeah, I think Weather With You is certainly towards the start, and maybe they're sort of bunched in the first sort of 5 or 6 tracks, which sort of made sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Great choice. All right. My number 3 is Led Zeppelin's Remasters.
Nice.
So I was as I said earlier, like a lot of these greatest hits were my experiencing of other bands other than the Beatles, and so when you you chuck on, and this was like what you were talking about before with the Elton John one. It had that big thick case with the I think there might have even been 3 or 4 discs in this one, with them being back to back on the disc. Because looking at the track listings now, it says side 6, so it may have even been taken from a vinyl original compilation. But when you start a greatest hits with Communication Breakdown, it's like, how could you not be attracted to what is to follow? And I think there might even be 1 or 2 live tracks on here as well. But for me, it just covers such like every sort of phase of Led Zeppelin, from their rockier stuff to their long winding, epic 10-minute songs, and also that their sneaky really good ballads on there as well. But again, going through a back catalogue of a Led Zeppelin, other than those greatest hits, it can be a bit of a drag to get through an album. Obviously, you got your classics in number 4, and which has about 5 or 6 songs which end up on the greatest hits. But there are a few other albums there where you kind of, there's 2 or 3 real good ones, and then it's kind of, long drawn out guitar, epic bits and drum solos and all this sort of stuff, which Led Zeppelin, I guess, were known for, and it was the music of the time. But a greatest hits, which definitely shows that they're better songs.
Yeah. This is testing my memory. It was sort of a goldy sort of cover, was it? And it looked like a crop circle.
An orangey goldy sort of color,
Yeah.
with like a blimp as a shadow.
Yes,
and
it was a shadow.
and maybe like an alien kind of mode field underneath or something.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember owning that in the 90s as well, and I reckon I may even been recommended that from you. I reckon back in our uni days.
Sounds like something I would recommend.
Sounds like something you would have done. Really great collection. I had considered it as well.
Oh yeah.
And you're right in that 4 is if you're not going to recommend remasters, you'll recommend that, but that then leaves this that whole other section of their catalog not represented. And you're right that there are some really strong albums in their collection, but for a casual fan who likes their sound, the remasters is you couldn't ask for a better starting point. And is that we talk about chronological? That one's not chronological, is it? Or it is?
I don't think so.
No.
But it could be.
Yeah. So it's either the art of you're doing it chronologically, or you've got a really good sense of what works, from one song to the next, or almost like you're going to a greatest hits gig, I guess, because that often helps with the flow of it. So yeah, no, very good choice.
Thank you.
Your
number 2?
Yeah, my number
no
2
crossovers so far.
No. My number 2 is certainly not going to be on your list. It's probably the most obscure artist on tonight's episode, and it's a greatest hits called "Hatful of Rain," which is a song by them which isn't on the album, much like Crowded House, by a Scottish pop rock group called Delamitri. Delamitri are probably best known, at least in this country, for "Kiss This Thing Goodbye." It was a radio hit probably in the early 90s, late 80s, 89 maybe. And they had a big song in the mid 90s that I think cracked the top 10 in the States called "Roll to Me." Not "Roll with It," although I think it came out maybe the same year. And it's like a 2.5-minute tune, which is a bit of a throwaway. But as the lads keep on saying, we absolutely hate that song, but it bought us all houses, so we can't be too mad at it. And they are, for a sunny pop rock group, they are the most self-deprecating band I've ever heard. The lyrics are very caustic and and yeah, self-deprecating, and often will belie the jaunty music that you'll hear. Hatful of Rain covers everything from their second to their fifth album. They've sort of all dismissed their first album that they did in the mid '80s as a great mistake. So it
Which is
covers
uncommon for bands. Usually, it's
yeah,
their first album, which is
yes,
the one they fall back on. So that's interesting.
yeah, similar to Paul Kelly. He's pretty much dismissed his first two albums, and to the point where you can't find them anywhere unless you go into a secondhand record store.
Okay.
I don't think they're on streaming services or anything. The Dells' first album is, but it's not widely marketed. But yeah, this is 17 songs. It's essentially the 17 singles they released during that period. So it covers every single A side. All of them, except for maybe one, made the top 40 in the UK, including Kiss This Thing Goodbye, Roll to Me. Their their very ill-fated single promoting the Scottish national team making the French World Cup, called "Don't Come Home Too Soon," which ended up Scotland got bundled out the first round, and even the video clip is them basically just realizing that we can cheer them on as much as we want, but they're not going to make it very far. And so they like I said, they do love taking the piss out of themselves, but they've just got these really great pop tunes that I cannot stop listening to, and I've since everything of theirs has been reissued on vinyl. I've picked everything up except for that first album, which is it's borderline unlistenable. But everything else I just absolutely adore, and it became the jumping off point for me to a catalog which, to your point before, if anyone wants to get into them, the greatest hits is the best entry. You don't need to listen to any of their other albums. It's only because I became a sicko and listened to every single track that I needed to hear more. I even found a really good B-sides collection that they released at the same time as their best of, because at that stage their singles weren't available anywhere to hear their B-sides. So a band that I absolutely fell in love with, but the best of is still one that I go to if I just want to listen to a good mix of their stuff. I don't have to create a playlist because it still exists, and from a radio singles point of view, it doesn't get any better for that band.
Very good. Might have to check it out. Good. All right. My number two is the very best of The Doors. So, again, another band who have some really good albums, but again, those greatest hits definitely shine over the rest of the back catalogue. Again, we're looking at one of those, must have been a thing in the 90s, those big, thick
Yep.
double CD greatest hits, and starts with Break On Through to the Other Side. Light My Fire's not till the fifth song, and I love how it's the full version, not just the single version on there as well, and finishes with When the Music's Over. As someone who, and this is probably a spoiler alert for a future podcast, that absolutely loves the Oliver Stone Doors movie, which I probably watched about the same time as getting into the Doors music myself. Through this greatest hits. It was actually something I'd always put on whenever I was forced to do some sort of chore around the house, be it sweeping out the garage or doing some sort of shit work in the yard or something like that. Get the Discman going and chuck on the Doors, the very best of. It was just a really good, background while you're doing chores CD to listen to, and I like the way. They're great songs, and I love the way that it's paced. They've really chosen the track listing very well. There's some songs I would have put on there or replaced on there, I should say, with some of their other tracks. But as far as the greatest hits go, it's right up there, and probably one of the most played greatest hits albums that I listened to growing up.
Nice one. No, really good choice. And is it that's the one with the the iconic Morrison image on the front as well? Yeah,
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 with the necklace and the arms outstretched, which
yeah.
again
No,
is shown in the movie as well.
yep. Ah, very good. No, good selection there. My number one, uh, and I thought this would have already come up on yours,
Okay.
is the September 1991 compilation for Cold Chisel
Oh
or
yeah,
Chisel.
no, didn't
No,
make my
okay.
list.
Okay. So by that stage, Cold Chisel hadn't been a thing for about 6 or 7 years. They broken up in '84, maybe did their last shows in '85 from memory. Um, but similar to groups like, and this is where I make a tenuous link between Cold Chisel and the Beatles and Oasis, I guess, is that when when these bands broke up, um, each of these groups, I talk about Oasis and the Beatles and Cold Chisel, had two different singers who could then go out and do solo careers, which meant that they were always in the public firmament. Um, so whilst the Beatles uh, became sort of like a throwback to the '60s, throughout the entire '70s, you had McCartney and Lennon, Harrison, and Starr all do solo stuff. So it felt like the Beatles never really went away. And it was similar with Cold Chisel here in Australia, where
Mm.
because of the Barnes and the Mossy solo albums, Cold Chisel sort of never went away because all you had to do was wait 10 seconds or 10 minutes, and there'd be an FM radio station playing a Cold Chisel song. Um, and and which is why, to go back to our Oasis discussion, is why Oasis haven't gone away, is because Noel and Liam have kept on producing music, and they've been doing it long enough that um, the idea of Oasis was still there, and we just had to wait long enough for them to return. And whilst we never got the Beatles returning, we did get Cold Chisel return sometime in the late '90s, finally, and it's amazing to think that entire period when Cold Chisel weren't a thing um, has now been dwarfed by the period that they have now been a band again. I think it's almost double the period, but it felt like it was an interminable period of time when everyone was still alive. Why wouldn't they just get along and just do new music? And whilst there had been a couple of different types of compilations beforehand, Chisel, I think, marketed for the CD era, collected, and it was impossible to encompass all the great Cold Chisel songs on one disc. So no one will ever be completely satisfied with what was on that track listing, but it was a good introduction as to what it is that they could do.
Oh,
Um,
very much
and
so.
that was, and that was underlined by the fact that some of the songs on there were the live versions of the songs, because they were a great live band. And in particular, if I think of a song like Bow River, which is a really good studio version, but for me the definitive version is always the live track that you hear on Chisel compilation, which is from their Barking Spiders live album. And it also ensured that whilst you didn't have a song like Ita, which still gets played on radio probably a thousand times a year, it had it had songs like Misfits, which was a B-side song, which it wasn't on any other album, and you hear it and you go, this is great, it fits with everything on it. And then it's
Mm.
only afterwards when you do that deep dive and you go, where's Misfits, why isn't it on any other album? It just goes to show that they had all these great tunes lying around, um, that they could have done 20 different iterations of that track listing, and it would have been enough to warrant for it to have been a big seller, but still people would have gone, no, this is what I would have put on it. Similar to what you were saying with the Doors. I could have swapped this for this, and it still would have worked.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Ida because that's my favorite Cold Chisel song, and
Mm.
my only knowledge of Chisel because I started listening to that exact. It's the orange one with the flames on it. Is that right?
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah.
Chisel.
It's
Yeah,
sort of a gold thing. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that was my only knowledge of Chisel at the time, and then when I finally went back in East, which is one of my favorite albums of all time, Ida's on there. I'm like, what the? Why isn't this one on the greatest? Yeah,
Yeah.
great point you make there.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
On that East album, there's about two or three other songs where you go, "Where's Never Before? Why isn't that on that?" And yeah, it's the fact that you can only fit so much into a
Never before. Oh,
74 minutes or whatever. So yeah.
You could almost do like an Ian Moss sung greatest hits chisel and a Barnsey, greatest hits, like, and have them as two CDs in the one packet, like
Yeah.
that. That's just how prolific and how great they were, or
Well,
are, I
and
should
and
say.
and this is where they're closer to probably Oasis than the Beatles in that. I mean, you could always tell where a John track from a Paul track, but the voices of Jimmy and Ian are so distinctly different
Mm,
that similar to Noel and Liam. I mean, you can hear, and we've been. This is the great thing of them going solo for so long. You've heard Liam do Noel sung songs and vice versa, but you can with Chisel you can hear Ian doing a Jimmy sung song, but you know that the voice is completely different.
mm. Yeah. I took Hayden to see Chisel on the 50 Big Top tour last year. It was really good. Awesome. They were in fine. Yeah, he loved it. And I'd seen Chisel once before at the Entertainment Center, I think in 2012, but Barnsley's voice last year was just on song, and it was so good because that has been a criticism in the past that his voice still isn't up to scratch, I should say. But yeah, no, they were great. Um, yeah, if they ever tour again, recommend thoroughly. All right, my number one, I think. Well, before I go to my number one, I think when we were in discussions of doing this episode, I think I brought up, and I did check it, that the Eagles' greatest hits is the biggest selling greatest hits compilation of all time, which I guess is not surprising given how big the Eagles are. Probably, but it's not hasn't made my list because I haven't really got into the Eagles as much as I have these other bands. But I get the sense that they're probably one of the bands that fit my category where the bigger hits are like the standout songs over their entire catalog, given it's probably so huge anyway. Anyway, I digress. So, at probably one point in time, these guys were probably the biggest act in the world. Probably really started that stadium rock era, and of course, it's Queen with their greatest hits. Another band I consider to have, yeah, a strong back catalogue, but the greatest hits are clearly the better songs because Queen, given that they were so talented, often went off in tangents with some of their album tracks, and you're just like, can we just get back to the Queen formula, please? I don't know if you feel the same way about Queen's back catalogue. But when we look at the tracks on the greatest hits, obviously we got Killer Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, which I probably would have saved for last on the track listing. You got songs like Bicycle Race, Fat Bottom Girls, Don't Stop Me Now, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Although my favorite song didn't make it, which is Tie Your Mother Down, which I think is one of the most rockinest songs of all time. But yeah, I've got Queen as my number one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Strange. Yeah. Yeah. Great album. Got plenty of plays in my household, that's for sure. Um, and yeah, if you don't know that much of Queen, it's a great starting point, and then you'll recognize a lot of those songs. Interesting, being in the 13, 14 year age when I first got into it, I always thought, until I found out it was Queen, Crazy Little Thing Called Love was an Elvis song, um, which, yeah. And what's another? There was a David Bowie song I always thought was Rolling Stones. I can't remember the song off the top of my head, but it's just funny how when you're growing up, you just, oh yeah, that must be that, and you find out it's someone or some act completely different. All right, well, this is almost stretched on to an hour, so we apologise for the rambling on, but if you've been with us for a while now, that's what we do, and we love talking about these things. So if you've managed to listen this far, you must enjoy listening to us and hearing what we have to say. So please hit us up on our socials if there's anything you'd like us to rank. Of course, like and subscribe and all that jazz, just to show your support. Anything you want to finish with there, Stuart? Ooh, yeah. Okay, that sounds cool. So is this Bruce Springsteen one like a proper biopic, like a life story sort of thing? Not one of those weird Bob Dylan ones that they tend to do every 4 or 5 years, where they get different actors to play Bob Dylan. Oh yeah. Sounds good. I'll start researching the instant we stop recording. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, well, I've given that away already. So where will it be in my rankings? All right. Thanks again for sticking with us. We're the Rankers, and remember, you got to keep them separated. Thanks, Stuart.